Welcome to Synced On Air. I'm your host, Angelique Robb, and today I have a special guest, Rayne Gibson. Welcome, Rayne. How are you?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about your experience and why you launched Taproots Horticulture Consulting, which is your current business. So tell us a little bit about yourself before we kick off the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was raised in the nursery business. In 2002, our family opened up a small production nursery that grew from a brokerage business. We decided, you know what, we're going to start with 10 acres. We're going to grow our top 10 plants for our top 10 customers. And over the course of about 10 years, we grew that to well over 100 acres altogether, three locations in central Louisiana, Forest Hill. For those of you who are familiar with that area, we got to see that business, went to LSU, go Tigers for horticulture, got a degree. I came back to the business and got to watch that grow. Got thrown into the sales role, and throughout the entire process, got to see what it takes to build and to scale a successful business from the inside out. Took that knowledge and took those experiences, grew that nursery up into multi-millions. Took that experience and then moved to Fort Worth, Texas. Took that and ran a landscape business where we worked with the upper crust, the highest in residential landscaping in Fort Worth, and then had the opportunity to run a wholesale nursery, a re-wholesale nursery, which had three locations in Fort Worth, Lubbock, and in Stephenville, Texas, where the home nursery was. Took all that, had a great time, grew those businesses, and then we had our first daughter. So you know what? We need to be back home. We want to raise our own family. Moved back to wonderful Lafayette, Louisiana to be
Woohoo!
near family and started my consulting business. Realized that, after years of building these businesses, that's what gave me the most satisfaction was looking back at all these experiences and seeing how a plan can be rooted and it can be established and implemented to see a business grow. And that's what gave me the most satisfaction. It's like, well, in a light bulb moment, it's like, well, I can do this as a consultant for many businesses rather than an employee for one. So here I am. That's the topics that I work on with primarily growers and with production nurseries, wholesale nurseries are the topics that I experience myself, that I help build. I focus on sales coaching, sales program building for sales managers, understanding what it takes to build a good sales team, production planning, software implementation, getting a nursery ready for either an inventory solution or a full-blown ERP solution, nursery design, trade show consulting, all these different aspects that I lived myself and got to watch them each build businesses. So that's a
Well,
quick
thanks for
rundown
helping
of
the
my
industry.
history. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm
And
here
we're
for.
excited to have you on today talking about why landscaper or not why, but landscapers are considering buying a nursery or investing in a nursery, kind of the same thing, what they need to pay attention to so that they can do it successfully or they can consider their options more clearly. So,
Yes.
yeah, thanks for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a topic that I've been really hoping to speak on for a while now because over the last 2 years since I started my consulting business officially, I've seen this be a trend in the landscape
Okay.
community to start to buy and to invest into re-wholesale nurseries or into production nurseries, to buy them or to start them themselves. And it doesn't come without its struggles. And I've seen multiple landscape owned nurseries not survive. One recently
Oof.
that just this year decided to close its doors, which, isn't as a nurseryman at heart, it breaks my heart to see. And I know that it could have been avoidable. So this is why I really want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this.
Of course, yes. Well, we want to be enlightened and yeah, look forward to hearing what you have to say. Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So, when a landscaper, they grow their business to a point and there's a couple of core assumptions that happen. They're growing their business and they think, well, I've done such a great job growing this landscape business. Maybe there's some other businesses that can help support this. It I'm looking at all the money that I spend on outside vendors. I look at, of course, labor and things like that. Then you start looking at equipment costs. So some labor landscapers will go in on a equipment dealership. One in Oklahoma that I know of, they bought an entire steel store, and not store,
Dealership.
a
Okay.
small machine
Why?
store, just so that they can have better costs for their landscaping operations. The next thing you look at is your plant costs. You look at your equipment and you think, gosh, if I just owned a business, I could save a lot of money. And that is true. You absolutely can. There are tons of benefits to owning a nursery, especially a re-wholesale nursery that also does hard goods and tools and equipment and more of that one-stop shop. There are some benefits, but again, it comes at a cost, and it doesn't come as easily as one may think. So that's the first assumption, is that it'll save us money. That if I own this other business, it'll help my landscape business save money. And it absolutely can, but we'll get into the details of that here in just a minute. Now, the second assumption, and this is one that comes from the passion of the industry, right? As landscapers, especially successful landscapers, we love plants. We love the outdoors. We know plants. A lot of us are horticulturists. We're arborists. We grew up in the nursery business. We know plants and we love plants. And we know that there's that disconnect of the general public's knowledge of plants and then our love for it. And we just want to envelop ourselves in that and bring that to the market. So we say, well, if we know
I think that
plants,
would be my reason.
yep, exactly. We love plants. So I'm going to open up a nursery
Yeah.
that grows plants, right? Maybe it's a garden center, maybe it's a re-wholesale nursery, or it's a production nursery, right? And it seems like a natural progression. If you love plants and landscaping, you also love the garden center, which is true. A lot of them love plants, and a lot of them that come from this place of passion love it, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily the best business decision. Okay. And then the third assumption, and this is one where it's a little bit less common of a position and assumption to have for landscapers, but I've seen it. We'll just sell what we don't use in our installs. I've got jobs coming up.
Okay.
I need 50 of these trees. I'll buy 75 because that's what'll fit on a truck, or, in like 30 gallon, 115, 30 gallons will fit on the truck, or 15 gallons. So 115, 15 gallons will fit on the truck. And my job is for 50, 70 of them. So I'll just buy a truckload of them to get a better price. And then I'll just let my wholesale nursery sell the rest, right? That's going to be their problem after that point. And
Leftovers.
the leftovers. So that's when I see a lot of, especially re-wholesale nurseries, just have a hodgepodge of just off the wall stuff. And they've got a lot of like onesie twosie things that no normal landscape uses, but they had one job that needed this specialty plant from Ohio, and they shipped it multiple states in, and then now they've got two sitting at their yard that no one wants to buy, and they bought it 2 years ago and it's been sitting there. I hope that doesn't sound familiar to anybody. If it does,
Keep
let us know in the
listening.
comments. Let us know in the comments if that sounds like either one of you. So, and that's something I want to know, especially as we're going through this. I want y'all to comment in the chat. If this is the assumption that you have, let us know which one that you find most attractive or most represents where you think you are, or landscape owned nurseries that you've seen. Assumption one, it'll save us money. Assumption two, the place of passion. We know plants. This will be easy. And then assumption three, we'll just sell off the extra inventory. Or if there's a separate scenario which you think causes landscapers to fail, let us know in the comments. We'd love to talk to you and to answer any questions you'll have. So that's the major three assumptions. Angelique, anything to add to that? What about your
Oh,
experience?
nothing. I think that makes sense to me about,
Yeah,
yeah.
good. So let's kind of go into each assumption and go into a little bit more detail about what that is and where this comes from, and then how we can mitigate that, right? Number one, it'll save us money. In reality, nurseries are very cash hungry because it takes a lot of money to get those plants to your location. It sounds simple because if I currently buying it from a local wholesaler for 20 bucks, okay, and I can buy it wholesale from the grower for 10, well, I'm saving 10 bucks, right? Pretty straightforward until you start thinking about, well, I have to put in a minimum order. At minimum, that's usually about 1,500 on the low side. Most of the time, it's around $2,500 for a minimum order. Some nurseries require you to buy an entire half of truck or an entire truck.
Mm.
So there's $20,000, $30,000 that you have to spend to get that $10 savings, which holds the place of inventory. And that inventory isn't sold. So you've got these
And it's
jobs
living.
living. It's a live, living, perishable product, which the eye of the value is completely held in the eye of the beholder. Anyone that's ever dealt with me or I've had engagements with, I teach them that phrase over and over and over. It is a live, living, perishable product whose value is only held in the eye of the beholder. Okay, so that inventory that has a value to it, the first thing that I teach nurseries, wholesale or production, the very first thing, and this is something that landscapers really could use at a nursery, is not an asset. It is not an asset. On your accounting books, your accountant or your controller is going to list it as an asset. It is the exact opposite. It is 100%, actually 115% a liability. It will constantly cost you money every single day it sits there. It
I
will
guess you
cost
have
you
to
more.
keep them,
You have to
the
pay
plants
for the
alive.
plant and then maintenance and then water and electricity and labor. Is called doing nothing but costing you money. It will never be worth anything until the check for that plant clears. Okay.
Mm. Yeah.
That is, if I could teach, if y'all walk away with nothing else, I mean, absolutely nothing else, walk away with understanding that inventory is not an asset. It is and will always be a liability. So if you need 100 on your job, so you have to buy 250 to make that $2,500 minimum order, right? You have 150 times 10, you have $1,500 of liability. When you multiply that by 115 to 100, like 30, depending on your operating cost, it's costing you
A lot of
every
money.
single day it sits there.
Yeah.
So number one, nurseries are very cash hungry. It takes a lot of money up front for you to get that $10 in savings. Does it look good to the nursery, to the landscape? Yes. It looks great in the landscape because you're able to buy for $10, not $20. But it's not the case because you actually had to spend a minimum $2,500 for that $1,000 investment.
Well, and I guess the question is, are you sharing labor between the landscape operations and the nursery? Because then that'll make it harder to see where your costs are going if you're not tracking the time that you're caring for the plants versus doing any of the other work for the landscape
Absolutely.
company.
And that is another a huge red flag. Whenever I do evaluations for wholesale nurseries and they have a landscape leg either attached to the nursery or driving the nursery, that's one of the things I look at. I look at your morning muster and I look at how many times the landscape employees are touching the wholesale product. I look at how that interaction looks like. I look at the communication between those two departments. Who do they report to? How do they keep track of those reports? Because that's when you're talking about costing and labor sharing, who is actually doing this labor? And I'll look at that from a chart of account standpoint as well as a operation standpoint. If we are keeping a crew, a landscape crew back to water and they're paid through the landscape company, then we're not getting a true operational cost for the nursery. Right? Pretty straightforward. I like to see a nursery that is kept separate. If we can, I like to see it as preferably a completely separate entity. That's preferred, or at least under a parent company minimum. because then we actually can tie it to different things. If we're trying to share admin costs, maybe we just do that as a percentage to go back to the parent company, whatever that looks like. But if we can keep it separate, the better. Because when we're talking about costing for the core inventory, the plants, you know, hard goods plants, either way, if we're looking at the core costing, I want it to be sold to the landscape company. What you sell it to and how you organize it, that's a personal choice. But I really would like to see the landscape company legally on paper buy it, tied to an invoice, tied to a PO to the landscape company. I would like the landscape company to buy it from the wholesale nursery and vice versa. I want to see that clear chain of command to buy
Yeah,
the
that makes
inventory
sense.
in from a vendor as the wholesale nursery and then transfer that to the landscape company.
Yeah, so
Whether it happens physically on the
you only
yard or
have
not.
$10 in your scenario of labor per plant to
Yes,
cover.
exactly. So for the landscape company to look good and to mitigate their costs for their plants, yeah, if you were buying it for 20 before, maybe you just buy it for 15 or for 18, but you got to leave some meat on the bone for the nursery to operate and to be successful on its own. You know, this is your child, this is your baby. You can't just do everything for it and
Overheads,
provide it. You got to help build it.
people, water, yeah,
Yeah,
everything. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So there's a lot that goes into it. So it'll save us money. It will, and it can. But if you want a more impactful results, you have to organize it in a way that makes sense for both companies, not for one just to cannibalize the other. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay, good. So then the second assumption is that from that place of passion, and we love plants, this should be easy. I love plants. I'm going to start a business that specializes in plants. That's great. It can work until you kind of get into the scenario of not knowing what inventory to hold, and you get into a predicament like I saw one. I guess it was about 4 months ago. I was working with a wholesale nursery that the owner just loves plants. I mean, a absolute plant lover. Um, Started a landscape business, grew it, and then opened up a wholesale, like a 80% wholesale, 20% retail nursery. They'll let the occasional homeowner come in and purchase, and their inventory was so scattered um, to the point where it didn't make sense for the wholesale world. Because they were only operating on 10 acres, they could not hold the appropriate inventory in the appropriate SKUs. So where they needed to have 200 of their core products, they only had enough physical space to carry like 50, 75 at a time because they had so many different SKUs. Because, Ball would come out with his latest and greatest boxwood. So they had to carry it. And they carried like four different specialty boxwoods. And, they would order 20, 40 at a time. So they got into a SKU issue of just having way too many SKUs. And that's
Yeah.
a big trap that landscape owned nurseries can get into is having to have thousands on thousands of SKUs for all the different jobs that they have to install and putting those SKUs into the nursery. So the nursery then can't make decisions or have physical space for the correct inventory to make the wholesale viable.
Yeah, I
So
could
if you
see how you could fall into that.
it turns into kind of like a garden center world where the customers that nursery will cater to are the like plant lovers, the chuck in a truck that loves plants. It's just him and two guys, and he loves plants as well. So he goes to your wholesale nursery because you have an array. You have a specialty nursery. You have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and he's doing one residential yard at a time. that's who you're going to attract. Where the business that you want to attract and you're going to shop on rooftops, that you want the landscape contractor business, you want the landscaper that's got 10, 20 crews, but you never have the right inventory for them.
I was gonna say, yeah, you don't have enough for all the jobs that are going on at the same time. Yeah, how are you anticipating their needs in the first place as well?
Yeah, exactly. So, kind of going along that line, as far as quantity of SKUs, a wholesale nursery operating on 10 to 15 acres, and you can go up to 20, 25 if you really wanted to. Um, Realistically, you should have less than 5,000 SKUs. And that's everything, including multiple sizes of the same plant. You should have less than 5,000. If you've got 7, 8, 10, 12, you can't. You can't realistically manage that many different types of SKUs and be successful for the majority for your avatar that you would like to attract, unless that is exactly what you're going for. And then you can specialize as much as you want, but still, that is a heartache for a purchase manager to manage. It's a lot.
Well, and I guess what you're saying is, you have to determine who you want to sell to,
Yeah.
and that there's some guidelines on who your market is and how many choices you will give them, and how many acres you need to fill that space or that many SKUs. Yeah, that much
Exactly.
variety.
So that
Okay.
place of passion, when you're determining what kind of wholesale nursery you want to be, you're going to model it after the person that you are, not what the market will bear. Right. So if you are a plant lover and you want to open up a nursery, great. You're going to model it after your fellow plant lovers. That's great. But if that doesn't speak to the majority of your potential consumers,
Mm.
that doesn't mesh.
Are there enough plant lovers in your area to sell to? Yeah, and make a
Exactly.
living off of, make enough turnover. Yeah,
Yeah,
good
exactly. So
feedback.
that place of passion can be very, very powerful when applied correctly. What I
Do
mean
your
by that
homework.
is, yeah, do your homework. Do your homework. Understand the market viability for that. Now, kind of going in along that tangent of passion, you started a landscape business because you hopefully, if you're in that realm of passion, because you love plants, you love the landscaping business, you love connecting with people, you love connecting people with nature, with outdoors, with outdoor living, with outdoor experiences. So you started this landscape company. If you in that place of passion, you really need to be able to transpose that into the nursery as well. If you don't have equal amounts of passion for both, if you only love one and this other one is just kind of byproduct, this nursery is a byproduct of that passion, that's when you don't see it working quite as well. If you want to build two great businesses because you love plants, great. But you have to understand that building this business, the landscape business, is going to be way different than building this plant business. Right? You have to have the passion for understanding those two different types of businesses.
Yeah, I
KPIs
guess
involved.
what you're saying is you can't really, when you're just doing a nursery, having a nursery to feed the landscape business, it's not enough for that to run successfully. You have to learn the model of how best to run a nursery because it's a
Yes.
different business model.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, so kind of talking about what that model looks like. I mean, for a landscape company, for you to grow and to scale your business, you're going to rely on certain KPIs, right? And what are those KPIs for a landscape business? You're going to get your market type. You're going to look at how quickly your muster time is. You're going to look at your input cost per job. You're going to look at your close rate per sales rep. You're going to look at how much time it takes to mow versus weed eating edge. Those are the KPIs you're going to use for a landscape company, right? Those task oriented KPIs. There aren't many task oriented KPIs that translate at all to a nursery,
Yeah.
right? So detailing, and I worked with this nursery that they were so proud. They had the numbers for what's the average unload time for a truck. And that's the KPI that they held their guys to. Guys, we've got to get this truck unloaded in under 2.75 hours. Like it's a whole semi, a floor stack, California stack, 3 gallons. That's great time to be able to do that. But to hold your people accountable for that and to use that as a growth model to say, okay, well, I need to shrink that down. It's healthy, but that's not going to scale your business, right? It's going to improve labor, sure, but that's not a major driver for what's going to grow your nursery, right? There's not many KPIs that translate from a landscape business into a wholesale or production nursery.
Yeah, the bulk
Right.
of the cost is the caring for the plants over a longer period of time, and yeah, quality, I would imagine too.
Yep. Exactly. So like KPIs that I like as a wholesale nursery are mostly around turnover,
Okay.
right? Of course, it's margin per plant, it's market timing of understanding when you need to bulk up your nursery versus when you need to start selling down, and when to hit your reorder points and have your reorder points fluctuating and how you can hit that. I want to see turnover numbers. If I buy in average 100 30-gallon live oaks at a time, how long does it take me to sell through 100? All right. When do I need to hit my reorder points? Do I need to hit it at 30, or do I need it at 20, or do I need to hit it at 50? How quick is this turning? Or should I order 150 next round or 200 because of trucking, whatever that may look like? That's what I want to see a nursery be evaluated
Track.
on traffic. I want to see their average order size, a big one, right? I want to see what's your average ticket size. Is it $500, $1,000, $2,000? What is your average ticket size? What is your average tickets per day, per week, per month? And then break that out into a seasonal opportunity. So don't look at like Q1, Q2, Q3 because that doesn't apply to our seasonal business. Because within Q1 to Q2, you're kind of splitting spring in half, sometimes depending on which region you're in. So it doesn't hit. I'd rather you look at your year and determine when your peak spring is, when your dead summer is, when your peak fall is, and understand that this quarter may be 3 months, but this quarter may be 2 months, and this quarter may be a month and a half, whatever that looks like for you, and understand that it doesn't fall in a fiscal year.
Yeah, and it's not really quarters anymore, but
No.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. You have to think about it.
sections of the year, maybe we'll say.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter. It's pretty straightforward. But to understand that it needs to be malleable in that way. Again, the KPIs are different. Labor efficiency is something to track, but it's not a driving force behind growth, right? New customers acquired, expands on current business, having a true business developer, not just a sales rep. That's where money is to be made. Right. If I show me a nursery, show me a salesman that puts in, 50 cold calls a week, that's going to be a good business because that's the effort. Show me a sales rep that, sits by his desk, waits for his phone to ring, that's where we need some work. That qualitative versus quantitative measurements of a nursery versus a landscaper don't always apply.
Translate. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't translate. So, that's some of the major KPIs, but so assumption one, it'll save us money. Assumption two, that place of passion, we love it. We're going to open a nursery because I love plants. The KPIs that get involved with what makes a nursery grow, understanding how that applies. And then the other major assumption is we'll just sell the extra inventory. And that's where a nursery in Texas, I watched them close about 2.5 years ago. I watched them close, and it was exactly that. Very large, prominent landscaper out of the Dallas region opened up a wholesale nursery outside of town, cheap land, and opened up a farm so that they can control their costing. And this was especially promising during 21, 22, when that was the hardest thing we could possibly do, was to get plants. You couldn't get them in spec. You couldn't keep them, and they were just being sold out from underneath you. People were shipping 1 gallons that had been planted as a plug 2 weeks ago, and they
Jeez.
were buying them and just hand over fist, like just trying to get them.
Well, and that's what I think the same time was we had the freezes in Texas and
Yeah,
really hard freezes. So much plant material that was in the ground died, and then nurseries couldn't keep up. So you can see how, yeah, let's just have our own nursery. Let's control that. I can see
exactly,
the logic
exactly.
and thinking that at the time. It was tough
It makes
times.
sense when you're in the boardroom and you're looking at this thing. It's like, it makes sense, but then in actuality, they had no idea what they were doing. So they quickly realized that it was losing way more money than it was
Shame.
saving because, they would buy the 15-gallon pittosporum that they needed for a job, and they would have two extra because that's what they needed to make a minimum order or whatever it may be. And they had two. So for a landscaper like me, I tried to buy from them. Me as a landscaper, I needed five. Well, I can't buy. They didn't keep the necessary inventory to supply their market. And every single week I'd get their availability and it'd show the same quantity, two 15-gallon pittosporum. So they just sat there and sat there and sat there.
Well,
Same
and then
thing.
it drives you to maybe use a different nursery for your entire job rather than get some from one nursery, some for another. So, yeah.
Absolutely. They had bought some 30-gallon Nellie R. Stevens, tried to put them in 45s, and they were selling them for a premium price, but then the specs never hit. They were at a 6 foot 45 gallon, which, is technically unsellable. You can't, as far as a spec goes, and they kept pushing them out, push them out, push them out. Okay, here we go. We got these beautiful 45 gallons that'd be on their email availability, but they never could get the proper spec. So it was, a bad situation all around of, will we have all this extra inventory? So like in the case of the 30 gallons, they bought really nice 30 gallons. They had extras to fill up an entire truck. They took those extras and said, oh, well, I'll just put them in a 45 gallon. I buy them for $120 as a 30 gallon and I can sell them as a 45 for $250. It's de facto $130 profit, right? But they sat there and sat there and sat there and never sold. So honestly, if a landscaper is going to do that sort of strategy, what I'd really like to see is the landscape company. Now, this is talking crazy, but I really like to see the landscaper absorb that extra cost. If the landscape company needs to buy a whole truckload to make it worth it, the landscape company needs to buy the whole truckload. If there's some extras to be sent to the nursery, let the nursery buy those extras and put it
And
into
then
production
grow them up. Okay.
and then grow them out so that you can see a true cost of goods sold. You can see a true input cost. You can see a clear line of succession from one company to the other rather than the nursery just absorbing all of this cost and all the freight that goes along with it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Again, just kind of talking wild. This is something that I wish more wholesale nurseries would do, but the allure of cannibalizing the nursery for the landscape's health typically wins the conversation. So selling the extra inventory, it's a different game. It is relationship based. It's having the right inventory at the right time with the right quantities. It is understanding your market and understanding that if I have to have these plants for this job, I have to have this specialty item for this job. I would much rather see a nursery maybe pay a little bit higher price from a vendor that would supply their core items for general stock rather than going with the maybe a little bit cheaper price from a specialty grower for that one thing and then having to fill the truck with stuff that does not make sense from an inventory standpoint to save a few bucks here and there.
Yeah.
So
No, that does make
extra
sense.
inventory isn't always an easy thing to navigate. So that's the main three assumptions. It'll save us money, that place of passion, and we'll just sell the extra inventory. Now, on the converse side, when the nursery does work, and I have seen very, very few landscape owned nurseries that do work really, really well. Number one, when the landscape company has their own internal design team. When
Okay.
the company has their own internal design team that produces the vast majority of their jobs. If the landscape install company is working with LAs from across the town, across the country, that's going to spec all these wild things, that
Be a
burden
lot
gets
harder.
put onto the wholesale purchasing department. Not a good scenario. But if a landscaper has their own internal design team that is responsible for the vast majority, like
Then you
70
can
plus
plan.
percent of their own install designs, then it makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. Because then you can have a beautiful conversation of, hey guys, like we've got 20 of these Spartan junipers left over. We really like to move out these out. Hey, Rob, don't you have a job where the guy's doing a barrier fence along the side of his ranch? Yeah, okay. Hey, spec those Spartans in there. Great. We both win, right? Those old Spartans get out. The customer gets their privacy hedge. Beautiful. Great relationship. Right. So when the landscape company has their own design team, it works really well. If you're working with designers from out of state and they're controlling the majority of your jobs, I don't see that working very well. There's a lot of really high profile install jobs, especially in Texas, where they would hire designers from New York and Los Angeles and Manhattan and all these different places that had no idea the Texas climate, and they would like flip open like the ball magazines and just flip through pages and put in a design, and it just didn't work. So when it goes right is when the design team is in-house for the majority of your installs. When it does right is when the owner goes into it understanding that these businesses will be treated separately. And we talked about just a minute ago with understanding that, robbing Peter to pay Paul, that for going into it for the right reasons, because the owner wants to build and establish and pour his passion into each business as itself. I want to build two great companies, not I want to open this company to support this company. Right? That's when it works really well. When they see it as an opportunity to satisfy the market, not just themselves, if there is truly a need, if you are kicking butt and taking names in your landscape business and you specialize in example doing hedgerows. There was one company that I worked with that's all they did was
Okay.
doing privacy screens. That is all that they did, and they were kicking butt and taking names doing it. That was their specialty, but they were having such a hard time finding that material, finding that specific material in the quantity they need because they needed minimum 50 to 200 at a time to line these ranches.
Okay. And you
They
need
were having
them
a hard,
all to be at a similar stage of growth too, which
yep,
is hard.
they
Yeah.
wanted them all to be identical because the people they were installing these for were very, very high end. They were buying 30-acre ranches to put, half million to multi-million dollar homes on. So they wanted them to look nice. Um, in that case, yes, it does make sense because what he was having to do was organize the perfect delivery time of ordering it to holding it to waiting for the job site to be ready and then telling that nursery 2 states away to ship it and then being there and having to unload it at the perfect right
Logistical
time.
nightmare.
It was a logistical nightmare. So he opened up a wholesale nursery that specialized in ding, 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 privacy screens. So guess what? When his clients wanted ideas for what plants to install,
Then they could look. Yeah.
I've got a nursery. I've got a,
Come and pick out what
and
you want.
I can show, oh, you want a espalier? Well, here's some over here. Oh, you want some junipers? Here's some over here. Oh, you want arborvitaes? They're over here. If it makes sense for the business and there's a market need, then it makes sense.
Good
Okay.
example.
It makes sense if there's a market need. If there's not a market need and if you're not having a major pain point, then you're just doing it for funsies. Right? Okay. It's also smarter sometimes to partner with a nursery rather than buy a nursery.
Okay.
Sometimes it's better to partner with a nursery than just buy a nursery.
And what do you mean by partner?
So strategic partners, especially when you have your own design firm, a wholesale nursery, what is their main pain point? Turnover, plant material turnover.
Material. Yeah.
Plant
Time
material,
on site.
not
Yeah.
person. Well, yeah, person, but that's a different topic. Plant turnover, crop turnover. If you can partner with a landscaper that has their own design firm or partner with a wholesale nursery, and you can say, hey, like I need 50 of these. It takes this much to fill up a truck. Like, hey, do you want these? And I'll take the extras. Okay, sure. Or, hey, look, I've got all this inventory that's sitting here. Can you help me design? If you design using these materials that aren't moving as fast as I hope they would, like some kind of quid pro quo in that scenario. The benefits of that is when people call the wholesale nursery, which it happens. Homeowners call all the time and we say, sorry, we don't sell to the public. And they ask almost every time, do you have a landscaper that you recommend?
Yeah.
Almost every dang time a homeowner calls and we say we're wholesale only. Do you have a landscaper you can recommend? Sure. We
And if you
recommend
work
Smith
together,
Landscaping.
it's,
Yeah, or whatever.
yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So a true partnership in that aspect. It helps the nursery in purchasing. It helps the nursery in their crop turnover, and it ultimately just gives you another avenue for sales. Different
Collaboration.
ways to skin a cat. Yeah. So, there's a lot of different moving parts when it comes to operating a really successful landscape business and having that translate into a wholesale nursery. When I say wholesale, what I mean is what I call re-wholesale. I should have mentioned that earlier. So I separate out production nurseries as the growers. I call those production nurseries. And then re-wholesale nurseries are the middle guys that have they're going to buy material from across the country, across the region for their general local landscapers. Majority of landscapers are going to gear themselves toward that re-wholesale model because of purchasing. If you want to get into production,
Whole nother.
call me. There's a lot more moving parts, and you have to think in terms of months and years rather than days and weeks. Days and weeks. Like as a wholesale nursery, you need it today. It takes minimum 2 days to get it in because I got to build the truck, I got to fill the truck, I got to route the truck, and then it just takes physical time for it to get shipped. I got to unload it, receive it to get it to you. So you're talking about minimum at like the quickest turnaround possible, like 2 days, or I can get it next week because I've already got a truck going that way. When you're talking about production nurseries, it's minimum 4 to 6 months out to multiple years out, depending on how big of material you want to go. It's a way different mindset where a landscaper is very much like they're looking at each hour of productivity and they're looking at their KPIs.
It's been very interesting. I appreciate you coming on here to explain the differences because again, I've maybe been guilty of thinking, oh yeah, have a landscape company. One day I'm going to have a nursery too, and because it does seem like it wouldn't be too much of a challenge. Maybe I shouldn't say easy, but but a lot of things that you've talked about really do put it into perspective and how much of a challenge it is to do a totally different type of business.
Yeah.
You need to know your KPIs. You need to know how to make one entity make sense without it being combined with the other part of the business. So I
Yep.
think, yeah,
Absolutely.
you've done a great job at explaining why it's not so easy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, the final words, and I've been thinking since we set this up, what my final thoughts, if I want y'all to walk away with nothing else, here's what I want y'all to know about. So I've got a
Drum
list I
roll.
prepared for y'all.
Okay,
Drum
good.
roll. Number one, I've already said it. Inventory is not an asset, it is a liability. Your accountant is going to want to beat me over the head with a hammer for saying that. But if you can get it out of your mind that I do not have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of inventory asset out there, it is completely a liability. One snowstorm, one tornado, one freak summer
Freeze
drought,
or
and my
summer.
pump fails and nothing gets watered, you're out, right? So it is completely a liability. Don't confuse vertical integration with guaranteed efficiency. Okay. Just because it feels connected doesn't mean it's a natural fit. Just because landscaping and nurseries feel connected doesn't mean they're a natural fit. The goal isn't to own more, it's to do what you do better.
Mm, that's a
Okay.
really good message.
If you are motivated by owning another company so you can get another check, right? Versus this is what I need to do to help my team perform better, more efficiently, right? If it's a fit, it's a fit. And ask yourself, do you want to be a grower or do you want to be great at the nursery or do you want to be great at landscaping, right? If you can't say yes to both, don't do it. Do I want to be a great nursery? Do I want to be a great landscape company? If you can't say yes to both, then don't do it. If you want to say, I want to be a great landscaper and I'll just be an okay nursery, it it's just going to be really painful while you're doing
Need
it.
some coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, I wouldn't be, a business owner if I didn't try to put my little plug in there. If you have this has spoke to you at all and you want a little bit of help of just understanding, or in the case I'm currently going through, a landscape owner is thinking about buying a wholesale nursery, I want to help you with the evaluation of that business. I want to help you
Good.
understand what you're getting yourself into. Make sure you understand the struggles that are going to be overcome and how to establish this business to be a great nursery, not just a crutch. So I want to help you with that journey. That is why my business exists, to be that resource for you.
Is awesome. What a great summary of takeaways and offering to help. So first off, what I'm taking away is not as easy as you think, and don't just do it on a whim. Make sure you understand that it's a totally different business.
If a nursery comes up in your area for sale, you know, if you want to jump on it, great. Call me.
Yep. Awesome. And we'll put your details in the show notes. But if you want to shout out your website and anything right now, go ahead and do it, Rayne.
Yep. So everyone can find me. Majority of my socials, YouTube, website is Taproots, TAPROOTSHC. Taproots HC. That is on Instagram. That is on YouTube. That's my website as well, taprootshc.com. Honestly, where you can find the majority of my content, I put 80% of my content on LinkedIn. Find it on my name, Rayne Gibson, Rayne. Rayne Gibson on LinkedIn. That's where I put the majority of my content, including a lot of these how to be the best nursery possible.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. And please reach out to Rayne if you have any further questions or he can help you in any way. Thanks, Rayne. Great to see you.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.